This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 55 people killed in 2 attacks in villages in eastern DR Congo. The WHO chief calls for an international pandemic preparedness and response treaty. And in our continuing series on kidnappings in Nigeria, we'll look at key factors contributing to the rise of abductions in that country. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, Kenya's currency reserves continue to shrink for the 4th straight week. And in your sport, over 400 athletes to be invited for June Kenya athletics trials for the Tokyo Olympics. We begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 55 people have been killed in the country's east. This is according to the UN, which further reports that the overnight attacks were in Chabi and Boga villages. The army and local civil rights groups blame the brutality on the Allied Democratic Forces, also known as the ADF. The ADF is an Islamic terror group which the UN reports killed 850 people last year. Meanwhile, the UN describes these latest assaults as the worst massacre in eastern DRC in 4 years. In an attempt to combat such attacks, the country's president had last month declared a military rule in regions where authorities are fighting armed groups. Where CGTN's Chris Ochamringa is in Kinshasa and joins us live for an update. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Chris. What is the latest from Eastern DRC?
Well, Hannah, the death toll in that attack in Ituri province has risen to 55. Yesterday, we heard there were 50 people who had died, but the UN has just said the number has increased. The local leaders in that area say that people who were riding on motorbikes attacked 2 camps for people who were displaced from another earlier violence and started shooting them. Now, some of the local leaders in Ituri province say that this the attack was carried out by the Allied Democratic Forces, but there are other people who were saying that it must have been a tribal militia because there was a leader, the wife of a traditional leader who was killed, which to them suggests that this was some ethnic rivalry that caused the killings of those people in that area. We have heard from the Army spokesperson of Ituri province, Lieutenant Jules Ngongo, who said that they are pursuing those the killers of the civilians in Ituri province, and that they will do everything to bring them to justice. But the people, some of the people in Ituri are just sick and tired, of the killings that have been happening in their area. All they want is a return to peace so that they can go about their lives like they used to. Hannah?
Chris, other than what you've just mentioned, what else is the government doing to handle insecurity in that particular region?
Well, the DRC government, first of all, instituted a martial law, or what they call a state of siege, last month, at the beginning of last month. It's supposed to run for 30 days. Basically, this is a period where all the civilian authorities in Ituri and North Kivu province are supposed to be replaced with military officers. So right now, the army is the one in control of those areas. And then they also instituted travel restrictions. The army has also been given the power to arrest people without charge, people who they believe are collaborating with the rebels who have been terrorizing the civilians in that area can be arrested without charge. That is what is going on. Now, since we have just started this new month, that state of siege is supposed to end, and the president has expressed interest in extending it for 15 days, but he has to go through parliament, which will endorse it. So that is what's going on. But in October last year, there was a stepping up of military offensive against all the armed groups in eastern DRC. The Congolese army started, deployed very many troops in eastern DRC to end the insecurity in that area. But we saw an increase in the attacks against civilians after this military onslaught. And that is why the DRC government is now partnering with countries like Kenya, Uganda, France, to help them, coordinate this, have a joint coordination of the activities there so that they end this insecurity once and for all. Anna?
Thank you so much for all that. Chris Ochamaringa speaking to us live from the DRC's capital, Kinshasa. Well, let's now turn our attention to Mali, where at least 5 people have been killed in a suspected militant attack there. A police officer is among those killed. The suspected militants attacked a checkpoint near the town of Buguni. The checkpoint is on a key route between Mali and Côte d'Ivoire. The attack took place on Sunday as ECOWAS was preparing to discuss Mali's political crisis. The regional body has since suspended the country's membership.
So they could not burn down the post, but we deplore the loss of a policeman who died during the evacuation, 4 civilians who died, including 2 foreigners, apprentice drivers, and we also deplore 3 slightly injured and 2 seriously injured.
The 74th World Health Assembly has come to a close with more than 30 resolutions and decisions adopted. The Assembly concluded with member states pledging to work together to end the COVID-19 pandemic. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
The 74th Assembly of the World Health Body adopted a landmark resolution to end the COVID-19 pandemic. It calls for the intensification of efforts to contain further spread of the pandemic.
Our world is at a pivotal moment. International health systems have been stretched to the very brink by COVID-19. The impact on our peoples and our societies has been truly profound. We must be united in our action to end this pandemic.
The Assembly highlighted the urgent need for a collective response to health emergencies.
Unless this Assembly agrees to comprehensive and decisive action and commits to an urgent and binding implementation plan, our one world will be injured irreparably with profound repercussions for all.
The WHO chief also pushed for a pandemic treaty to lay a foundation for global health security.
The challenges we face are profound, and so must be the solutions we design. Strengthening WHO certainly means strengthening the Secretariat, but it also means strengthening the bond between member states, which is very crucial.
The proposal for a global health security plan was unanimously backed by the Assembly.
We fully support proposals voiced by Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus aimed at reforming the WHO and making it a stronger, more effective, and financially independent international organization. An organization which is able to respond to all future challenges.
Another key resolution agreed upon is the role of the WHO as the leading authority in health during emergencies. It provides recommendations to the global health body to strengthen its current and future response to emergencies. Another proposal seeking to provide mental health and psychosocial support during pandemics was also adopted by the Assembly. Other resolutions include local production of medicines, ending violence against children, and addressing social determinants of health.
Member states of the World Health Assembly have not created a treaty as yet, but are expected to convene a special session in November to discuss the proposal. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The WHO's chief, Tedros Ghebreyesus, has called for speedy international negotiations to come up with a treaty that would assist countries deal with pandemics. Ministers from the UN member states are supposed to begin the negotiations at the end of November. Here's CGTN's Wanja Mugai with the details.
Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus was speaking at the World Health Organization's annual ministerial assembly in Geneva, Switzerland. He described the idea for a treaty on pandemic preparedness and response as one whose time has come as the world grapples with the coronavirus pandemic.
The safety of the world's people cannot rely solely on the goodwill of governments. Every government is responsible for and accountable to its own people. But member states can only truly keep their own people safe if they're accountable to each other at the global level.
The WHO boss says the COVID-19 pandemic continues to pose a major challenge. He has called for sustainable and flexible funding to deal with such challenges.
We need a generational commitment that outlives budgetary cycles, election cycles, and media cycles, that creates an overarching framework for connecting the political, financial, and technical mechanisms needed for strengthening global health security.
The Pandemic Preparedness and Response Treaty will not be the first one. In 2003, the WHO settled for the first ever treaty, the WHO's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, after 4 years of negotiations.
Thank you.
The delegate ministers from the United Nations' 194 member states are set to meet on 29th of November to commence the treaty talks. Wanjamongai, CGTN.
Well, let's stay on that topic. We're now joined by Dr. Bharat Pankania, Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School in Bath in the UK. Dr. Bharat, thank you so much for joining us. Doctor, how would you rate the WHO's handling of the coronavirus pandemic?
It's always easy to look back and say, could have done better. The WHO is the best that we have. Of course, they can do things better. So I reflect and think about the time it took for them to move from an emergency to declaring it a pandemic. And it took them a long time. And my reflection is that the decision-making process at the WHO is very committee-based, very multi-layered, structural. And as a result, it is not a very dynamic and nimble organization in the event of a serious, urgent emergency. And I'm not asking for a replacement to the WHO or anything. I'm asking for it to be more independent of member states. It's people who make up the WHO decision-making body shouldn't be afraid to make hard, fast, tough decisions, even if it puts them in a difficult position with the country that they are representing. They need to be independent of the country that they represent on the WHO committees.
Doctor, just looking back, as you say, when you look back, you know, hindsight is always 20/20, they say, but when you look back, do you think the WHO has the capacity to handle future crises and pandemics of this magnitude of what we've had with COVID-19? And if they don't, what do you think they could do to make them better prepared for future crises?
So I don't think the WHO has the capacity because its funding is very precarious. And we noticed that in the middle of the pandemic, although the funding continued, President Trump just announced out of the blue, I'm no longer a member of WHO. So we need a better, more robust, a better funded WHO, a WHO that works collaboratively with all the other large organizations like Centers for Disease Control America, the ECDC, European Centers for Disease Control for European Union, and similar large organizations all working in unison. But we really need better structures, better decision-making, and a much greater funding for such an organization. At the moment, the funding is not good enough.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Pankania, Dr. Bharat Pankania. He is Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School in the UK. Well, the World Health Organization has announced that they are naming COVID-19 variants by letters of the Greek alphabet. This is aimed at avoiding stigmatizing nations where they were first detected. They will not replace existing scientific names, though. Under the new system, the variant first reported in the UK becomes Alpha. The one discovered in South Africa becomes Beta. The one in India is Delta. And the one in Brazil becomes Gamma. The WHO is encouraging national authorities, media outlets, and others to adopt these new labels. Meanwhile, WHO members adopted a 14-page resolution on Monday. It agreed to strengthen the global body, including giving it a more secure financial base from which to tackle future health crises. Well, moving on to Ethiopia now, where the International Committee of the Red Cross is warning of a looming food crisis in Ethiopia's Tigray region. The global charity says farmers in the region lack the farm inputs they'll need in the upcoming planting season, a situation that poses a food security threat. The ICRC has pledged to donate 16,000 seeds as well as fertilizers to farmers in central Tigray through the Ethiopian Red Cross Society. The Tigray region produces cereals like teff, which is one of the main staple foods in Ethiopia. The area has, however, been affected by recent fighting between government forces and rebels.
After November last year, there was a lot of losses of seeds that we knew about. There's also been a lack of fertilizer arriving in the area. The land here needs fertilizer, so we came and did an assessment, and the first thing people said that they needed was fertilizer and some seeds. So we did an assessment through the villages, through the communities, and registered 12 kabeles, which consist of 3 to 4 villages each, so about 40 villages in total.
Well, joining us live for more on that from Addis Ababa here is Giram Chala. Hi, Giram. Giram, we're hearing these reports that food shortages loom in Tigray. What more can you tell us about that?
Information that comes out of the Tigray regional state strongly suggests that there are indeed fightings in pocket areas in the regional state. Some sabotage are also being reported by the government here. They've been saying that killings against the provisional administration there have been also staged, and the information suggests that at least 20 people have been so far killed, sabotaged by the TPLF force. And the TPLF force, on the other hand, have been saying that they have been gaining land from the Ethiopian National Defense, that they are determined to continue the fighting. But by and large, something that we can tell you is that the Tigray regional state is peaceful, and things are slowly but surely returning to normalcy. This is also according to the provisional administration in there, Hannah.
Giram, how is the government responding to this situation?
Well, the issue of food shortage, yes, it's there, and we try to speak to the international agencies as well who are operating in the regional state. As you remember, it was an issue for a long time, and now that open, the Ethiopian government, through its agencies, relief services have been delivered, and international organizations were also trying to do that. But when it comes to the agricultural activities, there are indeed shortages of fertilizers and selected seed. The provisional administration of Tigray has told us that they are now trying to address this situation. As you might have understood by now, the Ethiopian rainy season is coming. Agriculture preparation should begin now. So they are trying to address this situation by the provision of fertilizers and selected seed. And they say that perhaps in the coming week or two, the thing will be resolved. But generally speaking, yes, there are food shortages, and the government is calling on the international community, as they have made calls of opening of humanitarian corridors, to deliver on services as well.
Thank you for all that, Giram Chala, speaking to us from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Well, let's now take a short break and return. More news, including in our continuing series on kidnappings in Nigeria, we look at key factors contributing to the rise of abductions in that country.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has wrapped up 3 days of meetings with 4 European counterparts in southwest China's Yuying City. CGTN's Sui Huao looks back on what messages China has sent to Europe.
Going into these meetings, China hoped to shore up relations with Europe after recent tensions. Wang Yi met with the foreign ministers of Serbia, Poland, and Hungary. The 3 nations are members of the CEEC, a cooperation framework between China and 17 Central and Eastern European countries. The mechanism has enjoyed fruitful results since its establishment 9 years ago. But there's been some criticism. Lithuania recently backed out of the 17+1 framework, citing human rights abuses in China's Xinjiang region. Some have also been criticizing China for using the framework to expand its geopolitical influence. Wang Yi responded to those comments.
China's CEEC cooperation focuses on pragmatic economic and trade cooperation, which does not touch on the field of defense and security. It has never had geostrategic intentions and has no intention of engaging any sphere of influence. The cooperation is conducive to the balanced development of Europe on the whole.
Last December, a landmark deal was reached between China and the EU, but the European Parliament has put the agreement on hold after a volley of sanctions between Beijing and Brussels. In a recent address at the Munich Security Conference, Wang said attempts to turn trade issues into political ones are not acceptable. And during his meetings in Guiyang, Wang reiterated China's view on its relations with Europe.
China and Europe are partners, not rivals, and both sides should view each other as opportunities rather than challenges. We hope to deliver the prosperity of the 2 strong forces of China and the EU and promote democracy in a multipolar world.
During the 3 days of meetings, Wang also met with the Irish foreign minister. Wang and his European counterparts discussed various areas for deepening ties. For example, with Serbia, China hopes to strengthen quality cooperation in artificial intelligence and the digital economy. And Ireland says it wants more Chinese investment and more agricultural exports to China.
China-Europe relations have been through a rough patch lately. But this round of diplomatic meetings shows China's willingness for dialogue. As Foreign Minister Wang Yi said, different social systems do not make each other rivals. China believes when it comes to ties with Europe, cooperation will always prevail over competition. CGTN, Guiyang.
Today, June the 1st, marks International Children's Day. The day looks to support children around the world. Countries are holding various rallies to mark the day. Well, for more on that, we're joined by Ibrahim Alubala, technical specialist, child rights governance advocacy, Save the Children Kenya. Alubala, Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining us. Why do we celebrate the International Children's Day?
Thank you very much, and happy Children's Day to all children across the globe. This day is celebrated every 1st of June from 1925. And this was shortly after the First World War. Children had actually undergone a lot of challenges, especially after the World War. So the international community thought it wise to set aside a day to celebrate these voiceless human beings on the planet who did not contribute anything towards the World War, but ended up taking the biggest brand out of that war. So the International Children's Day is set aside to celebrate children and also just take a moment to reflect on their rights and how best to realize their rights.
Just speak to us a little bit about how far we've come just in terms of children's rights and some of the main challenges that you see in this arena.
The international community has come from very far. Like I said, from 1925, after the First World War, we did not have an international legal instrument to consolidate child rights. And it took about 50 years for the international community to actually come up with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, to begin developing it. The actual development began in 1979, and it culminated 10 years with the adoption of that instrument. That instrument is the most widely ratified instrument across the globe, And it crystallizes quite a number of rights from, but we normally talk about 4 categories of rights: the right to life and maximum survival, the right to development, looking at issues around education. We also talk about the right to protection. So children need to be protected from all manner of things, right from child labor, sexual exploitation, drug and substance abuse, and so forth and so on. And we also have a critical right around participation, where children need to participate. Now, looking at all these 4 categories of rights, we have come from very far, because right now, if you look at, for example, the global development blueprint around the SDGs, children are actually actively mentioned. If you look at the international community across the world, most of the countries, actually all countries except 2, have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and are actually doing a lot to ensure that it's realized. In Africa, we've also come from very far, because we have come up with our own instrument called the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, which crystallizes these rights in the same way as the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also has, a reporting mechanism to ensure that child rights actually realized. So, generally speaking, we've come from very far, and I would say that the child is at a better place as compared to where the child was 100 years ago. So even as we take time to reflect on this day, we just want to urge the governments across the globe to continue, ensuring that child rights are actually protected and properly implemented.
Thank you so much for all that, Ibrahim Alubala, Technical Specialist, Child Rights Governance Advocacy, Save the Children, Kenya. Let's now move on to Nigeria, onto a developing story that we have been following here. It has been confirmed that gunmen kidnapped over 100 students from Nigeria's Niger state. The attack took place on Sunday. Authorities say they arrived on around 70 motorcycles and then opened fire at the Salihu Tanko school in the town of Tajina. The gunmen released 11 children. Officials say the children aged between 4 and 6 were let go for slowing down the convoy. Well, CGTN's Deji Badmos now joins us from Lagos for more on this story. Deji, thank you so much for joining us. We keep on hearing these stories from Nigeria, and it's never easy to read them. It's never easy to hear them, and especially for the people that are going through this very, very tough situation there. Tell us what the latest is there.
Well, Hannah, unfortunately, there's still no confirmation yet as to the number of children who were taken from that school and teachers. The government of Niger State says it still cannot confirm the actual number. It says it is trying to establish contact also with, it says it's trying to establish contact now with the bandits to try and get the children released, but made it very clear that it would not pay any ransom at all for the release of the children. And I think now we're beginning to get a clearer idea of the group that actually carried out this attack. It's been reported that it's a group of bandits, and that these bandits actually came from Zamfara State. Zamfara State is in the northwest of the country, and it's been reported that this same group actually carried out the kidnapping of some students in a girls' secondary school sometime in February this year in Zamfara State. So the authorities say that they are doing all they can to get the girls released, but they are not disclosing much at all. I mean, the children now released, they are not disclosing much at all. But truth is that as at this moment, Hannah, we still do not have, no one has any idea at all as to the exact number of students who were taken from that school.
But Deji, how is this affecting education in that region? We read these stories, but there must be a lot of fear on behalf of the parents, the children, the teachers who are at these schools. Just speak to us about how this is impacting education there.
It's seriously impacting education in the country, especially in the north of the country, which has one of the worst cases of school dropout and out-of-school children. It's such a terrible situation in the north of the country, and this kidnapping has only compounded the situation there. A lot of schools have been closed, boarding schools have been converted to day schools, And some parents have basically, refused to send their children to school. Take, for instance, the kidnapping that happened some time ago in the College of Forestry Mechanization in Kaduna. Some of the parents have refused to send their children back to school. In fact, some of the students have said they're not coming back to school until they're absolutely sure that there's adequate security arrangement in place. So it's a terrible situation. At the last count, it was reported that Nigeria has a population of out-of-school children. The population of out-of-school children now put at about 13 million. That number would certainly have gone up with what we're having now in the northeast of the country, where you have Boko Haram operating. Quite a number of schools have been closed there for almost 10 years now. So it's really bad, and it definitely worsens the situation of the people. It increases poverty, and it's something that the government has not been able to come up with a final solution on. And the truth is that schools, especially in the north of the country, are not safe, even though the government has said it's going to provide security for these schools. But honestly, it's a terrible situation, and more children are dropping out of school. Parents are refusing to send their children to school for fear that they will be kidnapped or killed. Hannah?
You can absolutely understand their sentiments. And now, Deji, thank you so much for speaking to us and giving us the latest on that story. Well, we're staying in Nigeria, where there are mounting fears that high unemployment is driving young people towards criminal activities such as robberies and kidnappings. The government is under mounting pressure to address youth joblessness so as to shield young people from being tempted into joining criminal gangs and extremist groups. Correspondent Issei Makinde tells us more.
Mudi Madanjuma is a graduate of environmental engineering. He has been unemployed since he got his university degree 11 years ago. He now earns $20 a month teaching primary school children and says it's frustrating.
You see, that one was underemployed or not employed, but never, hardly would you once say I really had a satisfactory job based on what I targeted.
Millions of young Nigerians like Mudima are unemployed. The country's Bureau of Statistics puts the unemployment rate at 32.5% in 2021. It's a leap from 27.1% in the previous year.
You know, when the society fails to provide the necessary infrastructure, in place for people to get employed, people are creative, so they'll create ways with which they can be able to make ends meet for them.
Mudi Madanjuma says some young people have been tempted to join criminal gangs.
The youths specifically are into banditry, kidnapping, doing one form of negative vice or the other. And then it's really paying. People are cashing out, making money, living life as good as it can be.
Both young and old people have been victims of crimes such as robbery and kidnapping for ransom in Nigeria. States in the country's north, such as Kaduna, Niger, Zamfara, and Katsina, have been badly hit by such incidents. Governors of the state say that apart from efforts by federal authorities to protect lives and property, a consistent regional approach to insecurity is also needed.
But Mudima says other young people like him are determined not to break the law. He attributes that attitude to a good upbringing and the hope that things might get better.
There are a lot of expectations from you, family, those who invested in you. When you see those things going on, you really want to go into, anyhow you make it, but then it's a thing of discipline. Okay, this is it. Subsequently, we still trying to hang on with the hope that things will get better somehow, some way.
The Nigerian government is championing initiatives such as graduate internship programs and financial support for small-scale businesses to address the widespread unemployment. And it hopes such efforts will engage more young people and that the crime rate in the country will drop. Tessim Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
This week, China and Egypt are celebrating 65 years of bilateral relations. Their formal ties began on the 30th of May, 1956, with Egypt becoming the first Arab and African country to recognize and establish diplomatic relations with China. Yasser Kim sheds light on the cultural relationship between both countries.
It's only natural that two nations with a long history and deep-rooted civilizations would have strong cultural ties. Amongst other milestones, Egypt established the first Chinese cultural center in the Middle East and Africa back in 2002. It also set up the first Chinese language department in a university in the region, and now Mandarin is taught in Egyptian schools as well.
The cultural relations are so vital. Formal relations were established in May 1956, but before, in March of that year, a Chinese cultural delegation visited Egypt for 1 month, and before signing the diplomatic agreement, a cultural agreement was signed first. So cultural relations have led to diplomatic ties. In the last 4 years alone, our cultural center has organized more than 300 events in Egypt. A main event we participate in for decades is the renowned Cairo Book Fair, where Chinese publishing houses always seek to join and be active. This proves that we view Egypt as a beacon of culture for the whole region and worldwide. Our cultural exchange has helped strengthen our political, economic and other ties.
2016 was chosen as the China-Egypt Cultural Year, and it coincided with the visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to Egypt. Since then, cultural relations have further improved, and cultural activities have also increased.
The visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to Egypt was the first of its kind in about 16 years. It has opened the door for promoting ties in culture, tourism, economy, and scientific research. The Chinese people here feel they are at home, not strangers, because the habits, traditions, and family values are quite similar with the Egyptian people, and this makes cultural closeness between China and Egypt easier.
A Chinese Cultural Day, the Chinese Fair, and Chinese Film Week became fixed annual events in Egypt. The coronavirus has had an impact on all forms of life. However, it did not prevent both sides from continuing their cultural exchange and activities. Events have just taken a different form in line with anti-COVID-19 regulations.
The coronavirus has affected the cultural exchange, but we still organized many cultural activities in the last year, such as Egypt Sings Festival, a competition for the best article on China, art exhibitions, and other activities that took place online.
Despite the coronavirus-related travel restrictions, Chinese actors and movie producers attended the Cairo International Film Festival last December, sending a message of cultural solidarity with Egypt going forward. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
It's time now for us to take a short break and return your business news, including Kenya's currency reserves continue to shrink for the 4th straight week. And Zimbabwe's new horticulture strategy could generate $1 billion in exports.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Time now for the business news. We begin in East Africa, where Kenya's foreign currency reserves have continued to shrink for the fourth straight week, and that's according to data released by the Central Bank of Kenya. The reserves fell to 7.48 billion on the 27th of May this year, a 5-week low, and 1% lower than the 7.56 billion on 5.5 billion rather on the 20th of May 2021. Despite the dip, the reserves meet CBK's requirement of at least 4 months of import cover and the East African Community's requirement of at least 4.5 months of import cover. The shilling remains stable against the US dollar and other major currencies, exchanging at 107.6 to the US dollar on May the 27th, compared to 107.9 to the US dollar on May the 20th. According to CBK, gross domestic debt climbed to 33.4 billion on May the 21st from 31.5 billion on the 31st of December 2020. Well, Zimbabwe has informed Total Mining that its platinum mining concessions could be seized as no progress has been made in developing them. The Bakai and Kinonde concessions may be taken over under the use it or lose it principle, which allows the state to repossess idle mining claims. Zimbabwe, which is the world's third biggest platinum group metal reserves, has struggled to develop its mining potential, with investors from Russia, Cyprus, Nigeria, and Kazakhstan yet to bring projects into production. The Total assets were taken from Anglo-American Platinum, which does operate a mine in Zimbabwe more than a decade ago, and handed to Central African Mining and Exploration Company. Well, Zimbabwe has the potential to earn $1 billion from its horticulture sector. The government has launched a national development strategy that incorporates rural farmers to achieve this goal. CGTN's Farah Makotia now tells us how Zimbabwe was at one stage a major and growing exporter of flowers, vegetables, and other products, with frequent flights airlifting these products to European markets.
It's rapid, non-stop and thorough work on Churchill Farm as harvesting of Mange 2 peas is underway. 13 hectares of the crop have been grown here, all of it for export.
Consignments of the freshest vegetables are dispatched from this packhouse 3 times a week, destined for markets in Europe. But there are plans actively underway to open up new territories.
Lucrative orders have come in from the United Arab Emirates.
The contract that we've got at the moment with United Arab Emirates is got to do with garlic, it's got to do with ginger, it's got to do with potatoes, it's got to do with onions and so forth. Those we can give to small-scale farmers, because we will not be able to grow them on our own farms because of rotations as well. And the numbers are big. We're talking between 5,000, 10,000 tons, and that cannot be grown on one crop. So we see this as an opportunity that's going to open for us in Zimbabwe, which is a big window for outgrowers.
Expanding hectarage and inclusivity fits into a national strategy to expand production from 2020 levels.
We're on 114,000 tons with a value at around US dollars 77 million. And we obviously projecting that we can triple that in the next 3 years. It's critical for us to have all farmers on board. So we're very much focused on developing new farmers. It depends, and also there are sort of sector specific. So we're not trying to say farmers who have been subsistence farmers must come on board and export blueberries. It's not going to happen like that. But we will definitely support in the crops that make sense financially, and where we can lobby and represent those farmers.
The horticulture industry wants government to speed up trade negotiations and finalize protocols with key markets like China, as well as ease export processes which will enable farmers to be competitive. That, combined with a favorable climate, will help the country quickly reap the low-hanging fruit that the sector represents for the economy. Farah Makutuya, CGTN, Marondera, Zimbabwe.
Ethiopia has opened doors to a new $116 million private-funded bank that seeks to tap into the largely underfinanced mortgage market. Salam Bank aims to create the largest generation of homeowners in Ethiopian history and aims to finance more than 100,000 mortgages within 5 years. From Addis Ababa, here's Guillaume Charla with more.
Salam Bank is the newest addition to the already thriving Ethiopian financial sector and will specialize in providing loans to citizens who wish to own houses. The bank will start operations with an initial capital injection of 5 billion birr, or $116.3 million, and has been founded by the globally renowned Soul Rebels brand founder Bethlehem Tlahun, among other influential Ethiopian business people and entrepreneurs.
As you all know, I come from the industry sector. In this sector, we have witnessed so many of our employees living in rented houses, mostly spending most of their earnings there. The same is true around industrial parks. This is why we have formed this Salam Mortgage Bank to resolve this complex problem. We will work to provide loans for women and youth for them to get houses in a much better and easier banking method.
The new Salam Bank plans to finance more than 100,000 mortgages within 5 years, totaling 200 billion birr, which is equivalent to $4.65 billion. The value of the mortgage will equal 4.5% of the country's 2020 GDP.
Even in the richest countries in the world, the way wealth is created is through owning a house. So the bigger picture for us is, over the next 5 years, we have planned to provide 100,000 mortgages to people. That 100,000 mortgage means 200 billion birr, that is almost 5% of Ethiopia's GDP. That is what is going to happen in the next 5 years. On average, we will provide 2 million birr. Some will take more, some less. Secondly, this bank will be a positive disruptor in the industry by providing loans for 20 to 30 years.
Ethiopia's President Sahle Zewde, who attended the launch event of the Salam Mortgage Bank, said the concepts of the bank are highly appreciated by the government.
I have learned that Salam Bank has based itself on pan-Ethiopianism and that the mortgages will be provided to not only for those who are well off, but also for middle and lower income citizens in this country. That is truly a great thing to hear.
Ethiopia is one of the largest economies in sub-Saharan Africa and is the second most populous nation in the continent. Due to its rapid urbanization, the country needs at least 400,000 houses per year. Over the next 10 years, Ethiopia's GDP is projected to grow by about 10.2%, and per capita income is estimated to grow from the current $1,000 to $2,200 in 2030. These are the detailed forecasts and studies Salam Bank has based itself to enter into the lucrative market. Group Channel CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Time now for the sport news. We begin with the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Kenya plans to invite over 400 athletes to compete in the 3-day trials for Japan that will run from the 17th to the 19th of June in Nairobi. This was announced at an Olympics Kenya meeting held with affiliate national federations to give updates in Tokyo 2020 preparations. Athletics Kenya Vice President Paul Mutui also clarified that to be eligible for the trials, one must have taken 3 out of competition anti-doping tests according to the Athletics Integrity Unit's requirement on Kenya. So far, 90 Kenyans, 51 women and 39 men have qualified for the Olympics. Teams will arrive in Tokyo 5 days to their competition and leave 48 hours after they finish their individual disciplines. Olympic Kenya President Paul Tergat has affirmed that the country is on course to send its largest ever contingent to Tokyo.
One of the ambitious goals we set ourselves as a committee from the onset was to send the highest number of athletes to Tokyo Games. We remain on course to realize this, including so far having close to about 56% of our women qualified, surpassing the gender balance parity threshold that we all aspiring to achieve.
In boxing, Tanzania's Hassan Mwakinyo has clinched the Africa Boxing Union Super Welterweight title. He outclassed Antonio Mayala of Angola to win the headline bout of the second edition of Rumble in Dar. CGTN's Daniel Kija was there and brings us this story.
Hassan Mwakinyo Jr. is now the African Boxing Union Super Welterweight champion. A ninth-round knockout against Angolan Antonio Mayala brought on scenes of jubilation at the Rumble in Dar fight night. Mwakinyo says his win wasn't an easy one.
My opponent gave me a challenge because I had little time to study him. I don't like focusing too much on my opponent because come what may, we must meet. He put up a good fight, but that is what he deserved.
Mwakinyo's record has improved to 20 wins, 12 via knockout, and 2 losses. Tanzania's sport minister, who was in attendance at the event, says the fight night can do a lot for sports in the country.
It is an opportunity. Boxing is employment, and we, the government, are continuing to create an enabling environment for our talented youth to train and be confident in themselves. We're creating arenas like these, so if you have the talent, the whole world is watching.
The undercard of the night featured Bulgarian Pencho Teskov against Tanzania's Daniel Matefu, while female boxer Leila Yazidu took on Bulgarian Joanna Namweru. South Africa, DRC Congo, and Nigeria were also represented.
The fights are being televised live in more than 30 countries. This is the second episode of the Rumble in Dar event, which aims to raise the bar by giving Tanzanian boxing fans world-class events right here at home.
Boxing fans were thrilled by the performance of Tanzanian boxers.
We are used to seeing many bouts pitting Tanzanians against Tanzanians, but this has been different. From the first bout, it's been a Tanzanian against a foreigner. This shows that boxers have been given a chance to show their talent to the world.
You know, you'll see a little guy from Tanzania fighting a Bulgarian with a long reach, but he keeps it there and he goes every round. So I'm just proud to be a Tanzanian right now.
As the final bell ends, yet another international boxing match in Dar es Salaam. Tanzanian boxing fans will be hoping to keep celebrating wins from one of their own. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, on to tennis news now.